Hey there everyone, welcome to today's Advective Weather video. Happy New Year to those of you that haven't seen us since last. It's January 4th and we have a lot to talk about today. The US is going to be undergoing a 1-2 punch of systems. This is a map of the jet stream. We can see a wave near Oklahoma City at this point that's going to move through. It's going to elongate. It's then going to impact the Northeast, and then our first wave is out of here. The second wave looks far better defined. It's a much more defined wave moving through California, then into, again, the Four Corners, and then again stretching through a very similar track. However, this time the system is going to be much stronger. We're going to go over all of that today. It's going to be a longer video. There's going to be a lot of information, but I think all of it is somewhat important, so be sure to stick around. So here's the weather setup for today. Albuquerque, Santa Fe, and winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings associated with our first system that we're talking about. And then we have winter storm watches stretching all the way from central Washington through the Sierra Nevadas as well. So lots to talk about today. Lots of winter weather in particular to talk about, but there is some severe weather and flooding threats as well. So we're going to talk about all three hazards throughout the next few days. Speaking of the next few days, here's the next three in terms of winter weather impacts. So today we're seeing winter weather impacts stretching all the way from Arizona all the way to Kansas City, and then we're going to start to see those impacts move into the Northeast as we head into Saturday and Sunday. We're also going to be seeing, as we head into Saturday and Sunday, the Pacific Northwest start to get more substantial winter weather impacts, hence those level 3 and 4 out of 5 winter storm severity indices you see. So here's today, heavy snow throughout a lot of New Mexico and thunderstorm activity in particular in Texas as well. That's going to prompt a level 1 out of 4 flooding threat, which means that rapid onset flooding has a 5% chance of occurring within 25 miles of a given point. Remember that because we're going to be heading back to a couple more level 1 out of 4 areas here shortly. That does include areas like Victoria, Bay, Freeport, Galveston. Those areas all are within that level 1 out of 4. As we talk about rainfall on the evening of the 4th into the evening of the 5th. We see the most rainfall along the Gulf Coast. However, we do see a second maximum near Shreveport, Louisiana, areas of that nature as well. But again, the flooding threat mostly confined to Texas today, but tomorrow that does change quite a bit. So let's talk about tomorrow. We're going to be seeing wintry mixes stretching all the way from Colorado near Denver, all the way through to around Virginia, and there could even be some freezing rain, some ice, things like that as well. So like Charlotte, North Carolina, for example, could be seeing a little bit of that. Virginia, a lot of Virginia, including Roanoke, is going to be seeing a bit of that, and that's going to stretch not too far, but mostly stay within the Appalachians for the freezing rain threat. We do have thunderstorms stretching all the way from Texas all the way to North Carolina, and that does prompt another level 1 out of 4 flooding threat stretching from Houston through New Orleans, through southern Mississippi. That does include Mobile, Alabama. It's just south of Jackson, Mississippi, where that risk begins. That does include Montgomery, Alabama, about includes Birmingham, and that also includes Albany, Georgia as well, and it also includes Tallahassee, Florida, and I just want to make sure I'm not missing anyone. Panama City as well. Those are the major cities that I'm seeing that could be seeing some flooding impacts from this. Now, 1 out of 4, it's not too big, but it's big enough that you need to be keeping your guard up. Speaking of level 1s, we have a level 1 out of 5 severe threat tomorrow as well. That's Friday, January 5th. That is a marginal risk, and that is primarily for tornadoes and damaging winds. The large hail threat's fairly low, but 60 mile per hour or greater wind gusts and an isolated tornado or two are possible along the Gulf Coast tomorrow. So just make sure you have your tornado and severe weather action plans in place if you're within this level 1 out of 5 risk. It's not expected to be anything out of this world or out of the ordinary for you guys. Just make sure that you know what to do in case you are one of those people that do end up being impacted. So as we head from the evening of the 5th to the evening of the 6th, we start to see the trend here. Most of the rain yet again along the Gulf Coast, but we do start to see things move into the Northeast. And with that, we're going to be seeing a winter storm from January 6th to 7th striking the East Coast. Now, the chance of winter storm warning issuance, that's basically what the first graphic, the top one, is telling you. 5 to 7 inches is the criteria for winter storm warnings across most of this region of snow, so that's what we're seeing there. So much of Massachusetts at greater than an 80% chance of getting 5 to 7 inches of snow, and we see that 50% or greater chance of snow stretching through a quite expansive area. That stretches through places like Scranton, Pennsylvania, that heads into around Bridgeport, Connecticut. They're right on the line there. There's a very well-defined line. Providence there within that 50 to 80% chance. Boston making it within that, Concord within that, New Hampshire, Montpelier, you're just outside of that in Vermont, and Portland in Maine also well within that 50% marker. So this is going to be a high impact, widespread event here of heavy snow heading through January 6th and 7th. We're also seeing ice likely in the Appalachian Mountains, and over a tenth of an inch is possible, especially around like Roanoke, Virginia-ish. That's where the Weather Prediction Center is really pinpointing the most ice is likely. So here are the key messages. Heavy snow is likely in the Northeast. That's likely going to cause some travel disruptions. We'll time it out for you here in the next little while. And winter storm warnings are likely to be issued as a result of this. We're probably going to be seeing wet snow and wind here farther south in southern New England. That's going to be causing some travel concerns as well. There's going to be gusty winds. The roads are going to be slick, whether it's due to rain or some of that more wet snow. We could also be seeing some power outages and tree damage. Minor coastal flooding is possible due to the strength of the system and the winds that'll be moving ashore, and that'll especially be possible there on high tide Sunday morning. And we'll again be seeing ice impacts in the southern Appalachians, especially for travel. So here's what we're seeing. This is kind of a summary of what I just went over. Heavy snow stretching all the way from Maine to Pennsylvania, and then we see that ice possibility stretching all the way from North Carolina into southern Pennsylvania. So lots of areas there, but we also have, again, a flooding threat, even within that mixed precipitation zone, that blue zone. Here it is. That stretches all the way from near Charleston, South Carolina, all the way up farther and farther north. That includes places like Baltimore, Maryland, heading into New Jersey. Philadelphia is also within that risk. The entirety of Delaware is within the level 1 out of 4 risk. Much of North Carolina, that's Greenville, Jacksonville, Wilmington, all within that flooding risk as well. So lots of people within that level 1 out of 4. Again, that's a relatively low risk, but it's non-zero, so make sure you have your flooding plan in place. We also have a severe weather threat here 3 days out on Saturday, and that's going to be mostly encompassing Florida, but southern Georgia's in this as well. That includes Tallahassee and Jacksonville in the state of Florida. That includes Naples. That includes West Palm Beach. Does not include Fort Lauderdale. Does not include Miami. Does not include the Florida Keys. But if anyone's within this lighter green region, that's the general thunderstorm risk. That could be up to Cape Hatteras. There's a non-zero chance of a severe thunderstorm, especially when it comes to damaging winds. So just make sure that you have your plans in place for hazardous weather, especially because even if this system doesn't cause major impacts, the next one certainly could. Not will, but could. There's a lot of uncertainty yet. We'll get into that here in just a little bit. So from the evening of the 6th to the 7th, we start to see the trends move more towards the northeast for precipitation, and that becomes evident with time. So let's now time out what's going on exactly with this system using this weather model. This is the European weather model. This is the model I believe is handling the system best. So this model starts on the morning of the 6th and ends on the morning of the 8th. We start to see snow really intensify heading into the evening of the 6th, morning of the 7th, and then move out as we head into the morning of the 8th. And unfortunately, it is in UTC. Subtract about 6 hours from that time, and that gets you about what time it is. It's technically 5, but 6 I found is a bit easier to do. But this gives you a good idea of what timing is going to look like for snow moving in and out of your area. If you want more specifics, your local National Weather Service office, which you can find at weather.gov, or local news outlets, broadcast outlets, are likely to have more specific information as well for your exact location. So here's what we're looking at as we head into January 7th. Heavy snow is overspreading much of New York all the way through into Maine. So again, that does include places like Albany. That includes Montpelier in Vermont, Concord, New Hampshire, Portland in Maine. All those areas expected to see some substantiated snowfall, rainfall draping off the back of this low pressure system. But this system is starting to move out, and we're starting to see our more impactful system move in. That's bringing significant snowfall to the Rockies. It's already brought a lot of that to the Sierra Nevadas. Let's see what the weather models say here, though, for total snowfall and total ice in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic, respectively. And this is going to be the national blend of models that we look at for this first winter storm. Now, this is not exact. This is not something that you should take as gospel or anything, but it gives you a good idea of what you can expect. So Over half a foot of snow that's expected from near Scranton, Pennsylvania-ish through New York. That includes about Albany. That includes southern Vermont. That includes Manchester and Concord, New Hampshire. That includes Boston, Massachusetts. And that includes Portland, Maine. A lot of these cities I've already named. Those are in the biggest threat areas. That's because the Weather Prediction Center is doing a really good job of highlighting the areas that are likely to get the biggest impacts from this. And this is the model that the National Weather Service uses. This is their blend of a bunch of different models that gives an output that tends to be pretty good for this kind of stuff. Here's what ice is looking like. They're expecting again over 1/10 of an inch near Roanoke on this particular model, and that again matches with the Weather Prediction Center's probabilities that they were mentioning. It's probably because it's somewhat based off of this. This model again tends to do a fairly good job. It's by no means exact. Things are going to change on here, but this gives you a good idea of the general area that's expecting ice, and you know that gives you an idea of how you can make decisions regarding what to do when that ice does arrive. So here we are heading into the evening of the 7th and the 8th, and we start to see that the plains become the more dominant force in the weather system, the weather pattern for precipitation. We start to see our old system move out. That's heading towards Canada. Our new system is now well and in play. It's through the Rockies, heading into the plains, and it is widespread in nature. So we're going to be seeing on January 8th rain likely all the way from the Texas and Oklahoma panhandles to Iowa to Florida. So this is a rather large, widespread area. This is the first day where this system really makes itself known. So we have severe weather to worry about. We're going to have flooding to worry about. However, we can't really get into specifics on that just yet. And we're going to have snow to worry about. So severe weather, winter weather, and flooding, all those three hazards, that's what we're going to be worrying about. Let's start by breaking down the snow threat. So snow is going to be possible stretching all the way from around Albuquerque, New Mexico, all the way up to near Wisconsin. So this is the chance over the course of the day on the 8th that you're going to get over an inch of snow according to the GEFS model. This model does a fairly good job of this as well. So this gives you probabilities, but a lot of Kansas there, you have an over 60%, 70% chance of getting over an inch of snow over the course of the day. Over an 80% chance there along the Kansas-Nebraska border, especially on the eastern side is what we're seeing. But for some more specific locations, if you're in Kansas City, looks like over an inch of snow is more likely than not. If you're in Lincoln, Nebraska, looks like over an inch of snow. Omaha, Nebraska, over an inch of snow is more likely than not. Topeka, Kansas, an inch of snow is more likely than not. And I'm not going to be giving you exact numbers because we just don't know yet. But I think that these chances give you a pretty good idea of what to expect. So here is the chance of over 3 inches of snow over the same period. And we're seeing places crack 40%. Near Lincoln, Nebraska. Omaha there, only in around the 10-20% chance-ish range, so not very high there at all. Kansas City, not very high for over 3 inches of rain. And then again, the Oklahoma Panhandle heading into Colorado, the chances aren't overly high either. Over 6 inches of snow, chances are pretty low as well, just even across all the areas that we just talked about. That's not because areas are not going to get 6 inches of snow. That's because we don't know where it's going to be yet. But those chances will increase with time as we tend to know who's going to be in that 6-inch or greater range. I wouldn't be shocked if we see people with over a foot by the time all this is said and done. So, slight risk of severe weather. Not severe weather, I'm sorry. Flash flooding here, rapid onset flooding is in place, stretching all the way from New Orleans, Louisiana through Mobile, Alabama into the Florida Panhandle. Marginal risk much more widespread, including places like Cape Girardeau and the Missouri Boot Heel. That also includes southern Illinois, Evansville in the state of Indiana. Just within that, Memphis, Tennessee, Little Rock, Arkansas, Dallas-Fort Worth, barely within that, Shreveport, Louisiana, Jackson, Mississippi, Birmingham, Alabama, Atlanta, Georgia. Lots of areas there within that level 1 out of 4 risk for severe weather. There are only 3 levels, though, however, in the in the day 5 guidance. You can't get that level 4 out of 4 5 days out. Let's talk about severe weather now. So severe weather, also going to be a threat, stretching all the way from Houston to Mobile to near Tallahassee, according to the Storm Prediction Center, a level 2 out of 5. At this time, would not be shocked to see that grow higher as we get closer and closer to the main event. But For now, level 2 out of 5, make sure you have a severe weather safety plan in place. These are very similar areas to who's going to get impacted tomorrow, but it's up a notch a bit, and that's going to be the trend with this system. It's going to be a lot like what I've already gone over, just up a notch. So here's the evening of the 8th into the evening of the 9th, and very widespread precipitation is expected all the way from the plains, starting to stretch into the northeast. And what do we see? This is one of the craziest maps I've seen from the Weather Prediction Center in a while. We're going to be seeing precipitation from the same system stretching all the way from Missouri and Oklahoma up to New Hampshire, Connecticut, Vermont, and dare I say it could stretch into Maine. So this is very widespread. So we'll talk about snow first, then we'll talk about, excuse me, flooding, severe weather, and that kind of thing as we move further and further out. So let's talk about snow. Here are the chances of over an inch through the 9th. And what do we notice? Those chances are pretty low through the central plains in Missouri, Illinois. Those chances increase as you head into Michigan, the more mountainous regions of Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Virginia, and then as we head farther north into the northeast, those chances of over an inch of snow increase. Then we have 1 to 3 inches, 3 inches or so, greater than 3 inches. That begins to decrease considerably. But again, our more mountainous regions is where the most snow is expected. And finally, our 6-inch range, you'll notice that those probabilities are fairly low. However, there is a substantiated probability of over 6 inches of snow according to this model in New Hampshire, stretching into Maine. Now, again, this is not because there won't be areas that get over 6 inches of snow. It's again because we don't know where those are going to be yet. So we'll talk more about how exactly this is going to pan out and what the specifics are of snow in the near future, but you'll notice it's rather widespread where we're expecting snow, and we'll get into more details closer to the main event. Again, severe weather. The threat is present, a level 2 out of 5. That includes Savannah, Georgia, Hilton Reed, South Carolina, Dothan, Alabama, Panama City, Florida, Tallahassee, Florida, Gainesville, Jacksonville, Daytona Beach, Melbourne, Tampa, all these areas in a level 2 out of 5. And again, we'll have more details on timing, hazards, things like that as we move closer, but just make sure that you have your guard up for severe weather as we move into next week. This is a high energy, high impact system, so just make sure that you're up to date with the latest on what's expected. Now, this system then is going to really hammer the northeast over the following day. This is from the evening of the 9th to the evening of the 10th that we're seeing all this precipitation fall in the northeast. And as we jump into the following day here, this is the 10th, we'll notice that a lot of our snow has moved out of the northeast. We see that we have significant rainfall occurring across many of the areas that have gotten heavy snow, with the exception of northern Maine, and on the back end we start to see snow moving in as well. And then we start to see widespread precipitation in the Rockies, as well as back towards the west coast yet again. This system that follows, the one that we're currently talking about, that one's not expected to be as strong. We don't know much about that one at all, so that's all I'm going to get into it. And here's the expected precipitation stretching from the evening of the 10th to the evening of the 11th, and we see a lot of that actually ends up being in the northern plains, heading into the Midwest a little bit, and things start to move out of the northeast. Finally, 8 days out, as we head into Thursday, January 11th, we see that our major system has started to peter out a bit. It's moved out of range. It's not something that we're looking at anymore, and we start to move on to the next system, which we don't know much about yet at all. So, just to put everything in perspective, from this evening to the evening of January 11th, this is who's going to get precipitation. Anyone that's not in the white, that's nearly the entirety of the United States. Those of you that are in the those purplish colors, you're getting over 1.5 inches equivalent of rain over this period. But look at all those reds. That's over 2, 3, 4, 5 inches that we're going to be seeing in some areas of rain equivalent precipitation. That's widespread, that's high energy, and again, it indicates how potent this system is going to be. Well, with that being said, thank you so much for watching. I hope that this video was helpful and enjoyable. I know it was a long one. I know it contained a ton of information, but I thought it was important to get out because we have a high energy, high impact 1-2 punch moving into the United States over the next few days. So, if you liked the video, be sure to tell us by hitting the like button down below. If you want to see more content like this, you can hit the subscribe button as well. You can chat with myself and others on our Discord server, and you can leave a comment below if you don't want to join the Discord server but still have questions. And finally, thank you so much for watching and being a part of this community. I hope to see you in the next video that'll either be tomorrow or the following day.